Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 221 called Dr. Kelli Burroughs. This podcast is sponsored by RECEPTIVA DX. RECEPTIVA DX is a powerful test that has helped thousands of women who have experienced recurrent pregnancy loss or IVF failure. The test helps detect inflammatory conditions of the uterus that might be preventing you from becoming pregnant or staying pregnant. The most common underlying condition of a positive RECEPTIVA DX test is endometriosis with or without symptoms. If you or someone you know has struggled with IVF, RECEPTIVA DX may give you the answer and treatment protocols that you're looking for. Talk with your doctor about RECEPTIVA DX because the journey is so worth it. Plus, guys, Infertile AF listeners are getting $75 off the RECEPTIVA DX test. So all you have to do is go to receptivadx.com or download the app RECEPTIVA DX, use code INFERTILEAF23, and you'll get $75 off. Thanks, RECEPTIVA DX. Today's episode is presented by BELI. BELI offers modern prenatal vitamins optimized for fertility, prenatal, and post-pregnancy health. To learn more about how to optimize your fertility and pregnancy health, check out their vegan-friendly, dairy-free, non-GMO vitamins for both men and women at bellybaby.com. That's spelled BELIBABY.com. The best part, if you use code ALLIE15, you'll get 15% off your first month of either BELI Women or BELI Men. Again, that's code ALLIE15, ALI15, for 15% off. Thanks, BELI. All right, guys. So today's guest is Dr. Kelli Burroughs. She is a board-certified OBGYN who's been practicing with Sweetwater OBGYN since 2009. She graduated from Spellman College in 1999 with a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and she currently serves as department chairman of Obstetrics and Gynecology for Memorial Hermann, Sugar Land, Texas. I always have a hard time saying that word, obstetrics. Anyway, today, Kelli is going to tell us about her 2.5-year struggle with infertility, including going through IVF, and what it was like seeing her patients and treating her patients while she was struggling with her own infertility journey. So I always love having doctors on. She's just amazing and has a really unique perspective. So without further ado, this is Dr. Kelli Burroughs' infertility story. All right. So Kelli, hi, how are you today?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you for the invite.
I always love talking to doctors and people in the medical community about their own fertility journeys. And, you know, you're an OBGYN, so we want to definitely talk about how you had to go through the whole thing of seeing patients while you were struggling with your own infertility. So we'll get into all that. But let's start at the very beginning. Did you always want to have kids?
Yes. I always figured at some point in my life, I would be a mother. So that desire was there from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what did you know about your fertility growing up? Do you feel like you had like adequate sex education? Did you know about ovulation and getting pregnant and how, you know, as you got older, it would be harder in terms of egg quality and like all that stuff? Because we talk about this a lot on the show. I didn't really know much at all. I just kind of knew the bare minimum. So what did you know? Like, what did you learn while you were coming up as, you know, a young woman and a young girl?
So I would say as a young woman and a young girl, no, I was not in tune with my fertility, meaning I don't even think I realized as a young girl that women had fertility issues. So as a teenager or even in college, because having children was not on my radar at that time, then the actual details of trying to conceive and the problems surrounding trying to conceive, those were not conversations I was having as a young lady. So no, I was not aware of fertility issues at all. I wasn't aware of my fertility, how individualized fertility can be. And then definitely not aware how your fertility is impacted as you, like I like to say, gain wisdom or get older in life. So
gain wisdom. I like that.
My patients, they like that.
Yes.
So no, I was not. I don't think I learned about fertility until I was in medical school.
Okay. So when did you decide that you wanted to go to medical school? And did you always know that you wanted to focus on like women's health or, be an OBGYN, or did it kind of, as you started studying, did you gravitate towards that?
That's a great question. I'm actually asked that question a lot, or have been asked that question a lot throughout my career. And my initial answer is a very kind of standard one where, according to my parents, at the age of 3, I started saying 2 things. 1, I was going to attend Spellman College, and 2, I was going to be a doctor. And they have no idea where I developed these ideas from.
Okay.
It's just a spontaneous utterance one day. And after that day, I just kept saying it. So when I went to high school, and it was time to go to college, I said, well, I guess I'm going to go to Spellman. And then when it was time to pick a major, I said, well, I think I'm still going to be a doctor. And so It just kind of really just from me saying it, I just executed.
It's so like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, actually, yes, you can definitely describe it as that.
That's so cool. It's like you manifested it and made it happen.
And I had no other alternatives because I had not considered any other colleges. I hadn't considered any other careers. So when it was time to actually pull the trigger, then my options were limited because I really hadn't allowed myself to even think about other possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I basically started on the medicine track. So far as becoming an obstetrician gynecologist, that was less organic. That was actually a result of experiencing different specialties and realizing that those other specialties were not a good fit. Mm-hmm. And OBGYN actually was my last rotation. And at the end of the rotation, I felt as if I had found my passion. I had found the specialty that best fit with who I was. And so that's how I transitioned into OBGYN. I enjoy talking. I think one of the things that one of my patients would say is that I'm definitely a vocal physician. I engage in conversation during our visits. I also enjoy education. I enjoy just talking to women about where they are at that point in their life, whether it is a teenager that I'm counseling, or if it is someone on a fertility journey, or if it's someone who has actually completed childbearing. Those are areas where I feel most passionate about providing guidance to women. And then, to be perfectly honest, I have never missed having male patients. And so I think really working with women, that's just kind of the space that I was designed, that my purpose was for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's flip over to your personal life and what was going on with you. Like, when did you start to try to have kids and what happened?
So my husband and I did not start trying until we had been married for about 5 years. I was also already considered a little bit wiser when I married. I was 35.
Wiser. I love that. I'm going to use that.
I was 35 at the time. So, in the world of obstetrics, 35 is considered what we refer to as advanced maternal age.
Yes, I always got the term geriatric, which always made me so cringy. It was so cringy. I really
do not like the term geriatric, so I never used that term. I defer to advanced maternal age. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's any woman who is 35 and older. And to put it in a nutshell, it just represents a subset of women where you could possibly have more difficulty conceiving just because as you age, you have an increased risk of miscarriage. So it can just be more difficult to conceive. Not impossible by any means, but just that difficulty just starts to increase at age 35.
Mm-hmm. What about egg quality too?
Egg quality, yes. So that's the reason why there's an increased risk of miscarriage is because your egg quality is decreasing. So for women, we are born with the number of eggs that we are going to have at birth, that is your number. And as you age, that number decreases. And so as the overall number of eggs decrease with age, well, then your percentage of abnormal eggs starts to increase. And so we start to see that trajectory change at about age 35, where you have more abnormal eggs. And so it just increases your risk of miscarriage.
That's exactly what I went through is, and again, I admit I didn't know a lot about this at all until I got into this world. But, we started to try for my daughter when I was 34, and I did end up thankfully getting pregnant with her. But then I had secondary infertility when we started to try for the second baby. And when I finally saw an RE, he said, this is what's happening. You've got a good egg supply, but the number of abnormal, eggs, that's why you've had 4 miscarriages. And I was like, it was all like such a whirlwind for me and like such a new bit of information. And that's, basically why I started this podcast and also Fertility Rally community, is because there's so much misinformation out there or lack of information. I think it's gotten a lot better in the last few years, but it's exactly what you're talking about was what I was going through.
I agree. I think that more education is needed for multiple reasons. For me, once my husband and I decided that we were ready to try, at that point, I think I said earlier that we delayed for 5 years. That's inaccurate. We actually we delayed for about a year and a half to 2 years of trying. And then by the time I started to try, at that point, I was about 36 and a half-ish, give or take. And we tried for about 6 months, and then I started to get nervous. And even as an OBGYN, I always tell my patients, the definition of infertility is a year, but it's very hard for any patient, including myself, to wait a year when you know that your clock is starting to tick from an age standpoint, and then also from a desire standpoint.
Totally.
So we tried for about 6 months, and then I decided to be proactive and just see my fertility or REI doctor, reproductive specialist, who I refer my own patients to. I decided to just go for an initial evaluation. Well, the good news is that, my numbers from a laboratory standpoint look good. And so we were very excited. And the next step was to basically proceed with retrieval of my eggs. Well, that's where we hit the roadblock. And that is what really took me by surprise.
So what happened?
Well, because my lab work was so good, then we just kind of, we went straight into it. And the first round the first time we tried, we retrieved 14 eggs, which is actually a really good number for a patient to be able to have 14 eggs retrieved. And only 1 egg was normal. And so I was very devastated. And I was not anticipating such a high number of abnormal eggs. And so therefore I had to do it again, because only 1 egg, well, then that would give me 1 try. And if that wasn't successful, then I would have been left with no embryos to use in the future.
Right. With that 1 healthy egg, were you able to make an embryo, or were you waiting until you had more?
Yeah, no, we were able to make an embryo. So we were able to make an embryo. So I did have 1 fertilized embryo. Okay. But the odds, it's not impossible, but you just always want to have reserve just in case, the embryo does not fully mature once transferred back into the uterus. Right. So instead of transferring the embryo back into the uterus, then we went through another cycle in order to retrieve more eggs, in order to try to create more embryos. So I did the process again. And this time we were more successful. We were able to, this time we retrieved 12 eggs, and 6 of them fertilized and were healthy. So we ended up with a total of 7 embryos. So then after that, then it was time to move forward with transfer. Well, then I had more roadblocks. So when it was time for the transfer, then my lining wasn't responding to the medications I was receiving. So my initial transfer was canceled. So I did
Okay.
the entire process of the medications. And then literally the day before, my lining wasn't thick enough. And so then the process was canceled.
How did that feel?
Oh, I was so disappointed because at this point, I really thought that once I had the 7 embryos, then everything else was going to be pretty smooth sailing.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone has been through infertility treatments, you know the process of having to do the injections every day,
Mm-hmm.
take medications every day for a month leading up to the actual procedure of transfer. And it's just time consuming. It's a little
and money if it's not covered by insurance.
Yes, let's talk about that. And you know, I do not live in what we call a fertility friendly state. So Texas, typically insurance does not cover any significant portion of fertility treatment. So most patients are coming out of pocket to cover the cost. So it's a cost draining, it's cost draining. And then emotionally, you have these high hopes and then you hit another roadblock and then it's another, you have to give yourself time to emotionally, recuperate and try to mentally focus again and try to stay positive because that's also part of the journey. You don't want to become so negative and then that can impact just your body's response. And so there's just so much going on. And so I was definitely disappointed.
Mm-hmm. So how are you and your husband doing together? Like, were you guys having any issues between you? Because I've been very open about my relationship, and a lot of people I know, it's hard on a relationship too.
So not at that point, but the issues were to come. I will say that. So at that point, my husband is a very laid back, very kind of practical, very positive, meaning that in his mind, he just felt that it would happen. I, on the other hand, was taking it more from a percentage standpoint, my age standpoint, the previous roadblocks that we had already encountered, and now we're having another roadblock. And my medical mind was starting to kind of, I guess, influence my personal thought process. And I was starting to get nervous that we might not be able to conceive. So I think I was dealing a little bit more from a personal standpoint, like of turmoil. I think my husband at that point was fine. Yeah, I think it was just more so me just starting to get nervous that this is not going as planned.
Right. I love that you differentiate between, your medical mind. Like that's such a cool distinction because, you are a doctor. So you've got a different perspective than somebody who's not, but you're also a patient. So you've got kind of the both things going on. How did you navigate both of your minds basically?
So, to be honest, I reached out to friends. I have several friends that have also undergone the process of IVF, and some of them are also medical professionals. And I relied on them to try to help me to keep one from overpowering the other. And so I really relied on my friends to help me to walk off the ledge and to stay positive and to not allow the medical numbers to really impact me, but to continuously remind myself, what we would say is you just need one embryo in order to have a child. And so that's what, the focus was. So I really relied on friends just to kind of help me navigate and to keep my emotional self kind of in check.
Right. Okay. So what was going back to your journey? What was happening now?
Now, at this point, we're doing another round where I'm preparing for embryo transfer. We prepared for embryo transfer and then transferred, and it was not successful.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to ask you, did you have these embryos tested?
Yes, we
Okay.
did. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you had 7 healthy
So I had
embryos.
7 healthy embryos. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so we did our initial transfer, and it was not successful. So
Devastating.
after that, yes, no, that was very devastating. And it was, I think I was just the entire time, I think I was just really caught off guard because once again, my lab work, the blood work looked so normal. My ultrasound looked so normal. We had gotten to the point of, healthy embryos. So now my expectation was that once we were able to transfer, then things should go pretty well. We had gotten past the roadblock of the uterine lining. Now I'm trying again. The lining is good. Now we're moving forward with the transfer. And so I was shocked that it didn't work, even though I knew the numbers and I knew that the percentage or the success rate is only about 60%. And so even though I knew those numbers, I still, surprisingly, now that I think about it, I was very just disappointed and shocked that it didn't work.
Absolutely. So where did you go from there?
So from there, we tried again. And so this time they shifted the protocol a little bit and we tried again and it still wasn't successful. So now we are 2 embryos down. It's not successful. At this point now I just kind of need like an emotional break. Now this is when things are I'm starting to get frustrated, and my husband is still trying to provide reassurance. And at this point, I'm just not trying to really hear it because I have now started to allow myself to go into a negative space because I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting frustrated that this isn't working. I'm getting frustrated that I'm getting closer to 40. I'm getting frustrated that it is my job to help women have healthy babies, and I am not able to conceive on my own. And so these emotions are definitely now starting to reach more of a surface level. And, I think it's just natural that you become frustrated. But also during this time, not only am I becoming frustrated, but I'm also still having to genuinely help my patients navigate their own infertility.
Okay.
That's a unique, I think, space that I had never been in before, where before, I'm encouraging my patients and I'm giving them that reassurance. But now I can really understand the just emotional toll going through the fertility process can take on you.
Right. Did you feel more empathetic having been through it yourself? I feel like this is one of those things where you just really don't understand it until you've walked in, down that road yourself. You can be
absolutely,
you can be a good friend to someone, you can be supportive, but until you've actually gone through some sort of infertility or trouble, trying to conceive, I think it's just a different level of empathy almost. I feel like I've personally became so much more of an empathetic person after everything I went through. Did you feel the same?
Oh, I felt the same. And I think I definitely felt empathetic going through it. But I also feel as if I use it as an opportunity to try and really connect with patients on a level I hadn't connected with them before, because I can now understand that my reassurance, I'm sure that it was hitting them in a positive way. But at the same time, I could also understand that once they left my office, that disappointment was still very much the number one feeling. And to know that patients are really going home and having a difficult emotional time trying to conceive and maybe not having someone that they can talk to readily at home. For me, it was different because like I said, I could call multiple friends who are medical professionals and help them kind of talk with me, let me talk it out, let me vent it out. And we can talk about it from a medical perspective, but also from their own personal perspective. When you're a patient, you don't really you might not have that opportunity to have the constant medical professional reassure you at 8:00 at night. So I just kind of felt this sadness that patients I almost felt like sometimes they were going through it by themselves because they just didn't have or might not have just the support that they needed, or they just might not want to talk about it. I mean, I had so many patients who would tell me that they really had not disclosed to their family that they were going through fertility. I didn't disclose to my family. I don't think it was much later in the process until I actually shared it. And it's not that I didn't want to, it's just that I wanted to avoid the additional conversations.
That's so interesting. Did you feel like it was just emotionally exhausting to even have to go down that road with?
It was emotionally exhausting. And I have a very supportive family and I love that about them. I do. But I did not want to have to give an update after every transfer attempt.
It's so relatable. Yeah, I get that.
And, so when I would have patients in the office explain that they really didn't feel comfortable or they just weren't at a point that they wanted to share it, I could totally connect with that. And so when people say, oh, just talk to people about it. Well, sometimes, when you open that door, sometimes the support from family members almost becomes a little too invasive. And so you just decide not to open that door at all. And that's very different than me sharing with my girlfriends who are medical professionals, because they kind of know the boundaries. Like they know how to appropriately check in. They wait for me to share information. It's very hard for a mom to do that. Like if you're sharing with your mom, it's hard for her to wait for you to give her information. She's going to be asking questions.
Right. And they're coming from a good place most of the time.
But an excellent place. They really are.
But it's just like, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. I have a lot of, people I've talked to that feel that same way about with their family. It's like, where do you draw the line? What are the boundaries? And I think to a certain degree, you have to have those boundaries sometimes to like almost protect your heart and your mental health.
Absolutely. And I think also, there's still a stigma around seeing a fertility specialist. I think that there's still a generational gap where if you speak with older individuals, they still might have some questions about why you would even see a fertility specialist. Why are you just not letting this happen the good old natural, old fashioned way? And, sometimes you just don't feel like going into those conversations.
Yep, exactly.
I think that's one of the things I really realized going through the process is that not only, my patients are going through it, I'm providing that guidance, but then the limited reassurance that they might have because they're not really ready to open themselves up to other people and to discuss it. But the other thing I learned about how much support is out there, if you're willing, so far as like chat rooms and fertility groups and I was not aware of all the online support because as a physician, I'm not looking in those spaces. I'm just, I'm counseling patients during the day. And as a patient myself, I wasn't really looking in those spaces because once again, I have the blessing of having friends who are medical professionals that I can talk to. But from talking to my patients, there are really good resources out there that I learned about that you can have those conversations. And sometimes it's easier to have those conversations with non-family members who are also going through the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly why we started Fertility Rally. We have this support groups and the big one is every Wednesday night. And, we have them throughout the week as well in private Facebook groups, but it's almost like you can cut through all that other stuff, and you're immediately bonded on like a deeper level, and you don't have to explain all the acronyms and all the appointments. And, it's
Correct.
people who just get it. And, the reason that I co-founded it is because it wasn't in existence when I was going through it. It's a place I wish I had,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, so you're dealing with patients who are going through infertility, but you're also dealing with pregnant women, right? And your practice, how did that make you feel on just like a human level, seeing patients who were pregnant? Was that hard?
It wasn't, surprisingly looking back, my own infertility issues never gave me pause so far as providing care to my patients. That wasn't difficult. I think, to be transparent, where it might have, I think what I tried to impress upon patients, especially, and I still do this even today, so far as being pregnant, sometimes is not the most comfortable experience. I would say that. And so I think keeping things in perspective, meaning when you are pregnant and you're blessed to be pregnant, just knowing that there are going to be some times that you're just not very comfortable, but also remembering that level of discomfort is going to result in a child. So trying to keep that in perspective when you're pregnant, and then also trying to keep in perspective that there are so many women out there who would literally like cut off their right arm to be uncomfortable with a pregnancy.
Right.
So, I never had hesitation in providing care to my patients. I always thought that, that's the main focus of my job is to deliver healthy babies. So emotionally, that it wasn't difficult for me. I think what makes it a little difficult for obstetricians is just trying to sympathize with pregnant women when they're uncomfortable, but then also try to help everybody keep in perspective that level of discomfort is something that is going to result in a life that so many other people might not ever have an opportunity to experience. So not dismissing the discomfort, not saying that the discomfort is not real,
right,
but trying to just understand that it's part of a journey where the end result is going to be worth it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So back to your story. What was happening? What happened next for you guys?
So next, COVID hit.
Okay.
And so that caused another delay because then the fertility, everything was kind of shut down, was slower, things were going slower. So that within itself became a challenge because we had to wait. And so then once things opened back up, then we tried again, and it was our third attempt where we were able to successfully conceive.
Okay. So tell me about that. Did you do a different protocol before the transfer of that one?
No, that was actually the same protocol as the second one. So we actually stayed with the same protocol. At that point, all the adjustments had been made that could be made. And so we stayed with the same protocol.
Okay. So when you found out that the transfer was successful, can you tell me about that moment?
Oh, absolutely. I will never forget that moment. And the reason is because the nurse who is actually a good friend, and now keep in mind, I refer patients to this fertility clinic, and the nurse, I think she would be okay with me saying this, she is also my patient. So I have delivered her children.
Okay.
in the past, and you'll understand why that's significant when I tell you the story. And so I had gone I went for blood work to check my hormone levels. Well, unbeknownst to me, they're not supposed to check your beta HCG until a certain period of time. But the nurses, they were all so excited for me that they had been checking my beta HCG levels, and I didn't realize it. I didn't know that they were checking it, because at this point we're just following like my estrogen and progesterone levels, and so I wasn't even aware that they had checked my beta HCG levels, because I thought that we were going to wait for like another week. And so she texts me a picture of a positive pregnancy test. And I thought it was hers. And
oh my God.
And so I text her back and I was like, oh my gosh, you are going to be in so much trouble, because she has 3 kids, and her employer's always joking, like, please do not let her have any more children. And I'm like, I'm not making the decision of whether she's having children or not. Like, I'm coming in at the end. I was like, I'm just here to help the baby get here. I'm not a part of the process. And so it is not my fault if she's pregnant. I just help to get the baby here. And so it's always been a running joke in the office. So when she sent me the text, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, girl, I was like, you are in so much trouble. I was just like, oh no. And she was like, no. She was like, this is your pregnancy test.
Oh my God.
Did not conceptualize what she was saying. I was like, this is mine. I was like, we haven't tested. I was like, what is she talking about? So I called her and I was like, how is this mine? And she was like, we've been testing like for the last 2 weeks. Every time you come in, she was like, we were just testing without telling you. I was like, what?
Oh my God.
So I was like, wait, I was like, are you sure? And she was like, I'm sure. She was just like, it's a positive pregnancy test. She was like, you're pregnant. And I was literally about to walk into the room with the patient. And I just like ran out the door, and I'm crying, and I just asking for her to say it at least 10 times. I was just like, no, I really feel like a patient. I was like, but my patients are like, are you sure, Dr. Burroughs? Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm
right.
I'm sure. Now I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And so I was just, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe that I had a positive pregnancy.
And what did your husband say? Did you call him?
Oh, yes. I called him and immediately. And he said the same thing. He was like, wait, he was like, they were testing. I was like, yes, they were testing. I was just like, but it's positive. He was like, so you're pregnant? I was like, yes, I know. I was like, it's hard to believe. I was like, yes, after all of this, I was like, I really do have a positive pregnancy test. I am pregnant.
Oh, and wow.
So it was just a joyous moment. I think it was one where we just actually needed just a few moments to process it, because we had so many roadblocks. I think, part of us thought that this third time might not work either. So we were just elated that it actually worked. And now I was positively.
Yeah. I think you get to a point going through this and, having failed rounds or whatever it is, whatever hardships you go through on your own individual journey, sometimes you get so used to having bad news that when the good news comes, you're like, wait, what? It's hard to process that. It's hard to accept it.
It is hard to accept it. And then, to think like, wow, like I'm really pregnant. I'm going to have a child. I'm going to be somebody's mother. And you want it, but when you actually have it, it's interesting.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit before we wrap about the anxiety, if you had any, of pregnancy after loss or not even loss, but pregnancy after infertility? Did you have any of that where, kind of like we were just saying, you're not used to having good news. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around something good is happening. Did you have any of that?
I did. Oh, and I forgot. Okay. So I know this is edible.
Yeah.
So I forgot to say that because this is part of the delay too. So after the first failure, it's all running together now. After the first failure, I actually naturally conceived.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it was not planned. And that sounds so ridiculous saying that as an OBGYN, because of course I know exactly how people get pregnant, but we did not think we could actually conceive, which was ridiculous as an OBGYN saying that. But I got pregnant and it ended up in a miscarriage. So I had the failure, then I had a miscarriage, then we had another failure of transfer, and then COVID, and then I got pregnant. So then, yes, I had serious anxiety because I had already had a miscarriage.
Okay. Right. Yes.
So, now that I'm pregnant, that excitement was definitely still there and remained, but there was some underlying anxiety there that I tried to once again just stay as positive as possible. I think that's really important, but it's difficult to do, and I see that now even more so because I've gone through it before. But for anyone who's had a history of infertility or a history of miscarriage, once you actually have a positive pregnancy test, it's natural to feel apprehensive about
Mhm.
if the pregnancy is going to actually even develop, is it going to go forward? And as an OBGYN, you just have way too much information because not only do you know the possible complications with early pregnancy loss, but you know all the complications that come with pregnancy in general, even in the third trimester after delivery. And you could literally go into a rabbit hole with all the negative that we have to unfortunately endure in our career. But I really tried to block that out and focus on just, I really went into a health wise mindset where I just told myself, I'm going to do everything I can to be as healthy as possible.
Mhm.
And I'm going to have to also really rely on God and his will regarding this pregnancy.
Mm.
Because otherwise, if I continuously question or think about everything that could go wrong, it takes away from the positive experience.
Mhm.
And so I really was trying not to do that. And it's not easy to do. It's by no means is it easy to do. And it's not like I just woke up one day and just said, okay, now I'm going to be positive. No, it was a process. And there were days where I was still very nervous and anxious about just going forward and what was to come. But for the most part, I really tried to just check my emotional intelligence and try to remain as positive and focus on things that I had in my control, meaning trying to eat healthy, working out, trying to get my good sleep, all the things that I would tell my patients. I was like, these are the things that now you have to do as a patient.
Right. It's so interesting, just everything that you've been through. Can you tell me, for people who might be listening now, or, things that you tell your patients now, having kind of come out on the other side, successful IVF and healthy pregnancy and baby, if somebody comes in really struggling, what do you say to them?
Say, number one, do not give up. Be
Mhm.
persistent with your desire as long as it's there.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there are going to be some times where it's not going to end with the desired result. But I think patients should try until they're emotionally at a point that they do not want to try anymore. And that's only a space that you and your husband or your partner can decide where is that line in the sand. But until you get to that line, try to remain positive. Know that it only takes one embryo to produce a child.
Mhm.
I've had patients who that's all they were able to retrieve was one
Yeah.
egg, fertilized, one embryo, but they were able to have a child. And
Yeah.
so,
That's what happened with me. I had
see,
one healthy embryo. I had 5 that were tested and 4 came back abnormal. And the one healthy embryo is now my 7-year-old son.
if the means are available for a fertility consult to see a fertility physician, even though it is economically draining, it is sometimes it's emotionally draining, and sometimes it's even physically draining. I do think going through the process will allow you to look back and not have any regrets.
Mhm.
And so I think that's really important for patients just to seek medical consultation and to know that these options are out there. They have resulted in beautiful children, but the most important thing is to see a healthcare professional who can help walk you through that journey. Definitely do not try to do it on your own. We want to do everything that we can in order for people to reach their family goals.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Dr. Kelli Burroughs. And guys, if you liked this podcast or you are a fan, please take 2 seconds to go and rate and review. It really helps with the algorithm and helps us get discovered. You can do that on any of the podcast platforms. 5-star rating and just a little sentence goes tremendously. So thank you for that. And also check out Fertility Rally if you guys are looking for a community of people who get it. We are open. We are actually open all the time now instead of just the first week of the year. So you can go check us out and, check out our support groups and our website, which has tons of content and all the videos from our past Rally Live events, almost all of them, and so much more. So you can always reach out to me or Blair, my co-founder, at Fertility Rally on Instagram, or you can DM me at Infertile AF Stories, and I will get back to you to answer any cues. So join us if you're going through this. You do not have to be going through it alone. All right, thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.